Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's special nutrition event. My name is Liz Purvis. I am a Koji ambassador. Today, we are joined by two members of the Nutritional Therapy for IBD team. We have Nicole Wake, an RD specializing in nutritional therapy for Crohn's disease, and Kristen McCollum, representing organizational engagement. Today, we're diving into a topic that's very important for many people in our community, how to read food labels. This is especially important for those with gastrointestinal issues like IBD.
Thank you, Liz. My name is Christy McCollum, and joining me today is Nicole Wake. Liz Hubchak, another one of our team members, is unfortunately unable to join us today as she originally planned. However, I have to mention that Liz represents our patient resources team and is the author of the Decoding the Mystery, Making Sense of Food Labels resource. Much of what you will hear today can actually be found on that resource, and you can print and reference that later when needed. Nicole, Liz, and I are all here as IBD patients or caregivers, and we are honored to be with you today on behalf of Nutritional Therapy for IBD. Our nonprofit organization is dedicated to advancing evidence-based nutrition as part of IBD treatment plans to enhance the well-being and outcomes of all children and adults with IBD. I can speak for all of us when I tell you that we have all experienced improved health and healing because of our focus on nutrition as part of IBD treatment. So one of the first things I had to learn when my daughter got diagnosed was how to read a food label. Prior to her diagnosis, I rarely looked at a label. I definitely did not cook as often as I do now. I would notice maybe the marketing logos on the front of the package, advertising if a product was all natural or heart healthy, but I would never flip the package over to read the back of the label. Maybe some of you guys can relate. But I quickly discovered just how important it is to know exactly what we're putting in our bodies. Today, I read the label of every single packaged product that I put into my grocery cart. And so we are excited to be here today to help you all navigate reading the food labels.
It's amazing. I'm sure we can all agree that this is such an important topic. So let's jump right in. A lot of our community struggle with GI issues, and it can be overwhelming to choose the right food labels. Can you tell us why understanding food labels is so important for people with GI issues?
Yeah, it can certainly be overwhelming to somebody with IBD to know the best foods for them to eat. IBD affects the digestive system, so food choices may become more complicated since everyone has very individualized reactions to certain foods. The foods someone can tolerate may vary when you're on a flare or in remission. And so being able to better understand food labels can help minimize eating foods that may trigger or worsen symptoms. And also knowing how to read a food label will help someone to make healthier food choices for their unique dietary needs, such as correcting maybe a nutrient deficiency or ensuring proper caloric intake. Research is now showing us that there is a really important link between nutrition and gut health, especially in the management of IBD. There are many known ingredients that negatively are impacting our gut health. For example, food additives and preservatives. And knowing how to identify those ingredients on a food label will help ensure that these ingredients are minimally consumed.
That's a really great point. So let's talk about food labels. When looking at a food label, what are the most important sections someone with GI issues should focus on first?
There are three specific nutrients on a nutrition facts panel that do affect digestion and can impact symptoms, such as fiber, sugar, and fat. Too many of any of these can create digestive distress, such as like bloating, gas, pain, cramping in someone with GI issues. And the amount tolerated of each of these ingredients at any given time is variable by person. So it's good to keep track of your own intake so that you can identify exactly how much you can tolerate individually. When it comes to sugar specifically, there are different names for sugar that can be found on the ingredients list. And we have some examples here. Things like high fructose corn syrup indicates sugar, juice concentrates, molasses, regular corn syrup, brown sugar, and then you'll also see sugar itself on the ingredients list. Not all of the products are created equally. So we have another example, a couple different images on food labels for barbecue sauce. So looking at the sugar content, you may see barbecue sauce that's high in sugar, and so you write off barbecue sauce altogether. However, there are different products. Keep your eye out and find ones that are better tolerated. So the barbecue sauce on the left is 70 calories and 17 grams of sugar. And then on the right is only 30 calories per serving and only 5 grams of sugar. And that one may be better tolerated if you struggle with sugar. Another last thought to have with sugar to talk about is total sugars versus added sugars. You may see this on the nutrient facts panel and wonder if it makes a difference. What this all means is that total sugar encompasses both the natural sugar in the food and the added sugar in the food. The added sugar is, like we talked about before, found in the ingredients list, like high fructose corn syrup, sugar, molasses. Those are all added into the food product. Natural sugar is food found naturally. Sugars found naturally in food, like tomatoes, contain sugar. And so barbecue sauce will have both natural sugar and added sugar. If you're thinking about tolerance issues, looking at the total grams of sugar is more important than whether it's added or natural.
Those are some really great tips. Let's move to the ingredients list. What should we be aware of when we're looking at ingredients?
So when it comes to the ingredients list and the way that manufacturers create these lists, the top item listed, so looking at that barbecue sauce, for example, the high fructose corn syrup is the very first item listed. And what that means is that it is the item that is more so in the food, like there's more by weight of the high fructose corn syrup versus like at the bottom you see like natural flavor, celery seeds, tamarind. There's much less by weight of those items in the food.
Perfect. That's great to know. We also know that people with gluten sensitivities, gluten intolerance will need to be vigilant. Can you explain how someone who might not be familiar with gluten can spot gluten in the ingredients list?
Gluten can show up in foods listed under many different names, some of which include wheat, barley, rye, malt, or hidden names such as malt extract, brewer's yeast, yeast extract, and modified cornstarch, which can all potentially be contaminated with gluten. So it's really important, especially as you're starting to get into like a more gluten-free lifestyle, that you are reading food labels very, very closely. So we have an example of like soy sauce, for example, that you might look at it, you think it's soy sauce, perfectly fine, but double check that ingredients list because soy sauce is water, soybeans, wheat, and salt. So wheat may also be in the ingredients list. Double check everything when you're getting used to a gluten-free lifestyle.
That's great advice. Double check, always read the labels. Now, let's talk about food additives and preservatives. Do these show up on labels, and should they be a concern for people with GI issues?
Yeah, food additives and preservatives do show up on the labels, although there are many, many different names. And so on our label reading resource that NT4IBD has, you can see an exhaustive list, but just to talk a little bit more about it in depth, the concern for people in general, not just everybody, not just those with GI diseases, but people in general, food additives and preservatives do affect the gut microbiome, which can lead to GI symptoms such as bloating and gas, but they can also weaken the gut lining. And this can create more permeability, allowing things to pass through into your system that normally wouldn't be able to or shouldn't be able to, which can increase the risk of inflammation, food allergies, and intolerances, and also potentially lead to like illnesses and sickness. Some examples of concerning food additives to be on the lookout for include artificial colors, artificial sweeteners like aspartame and sucralose, emulsifiers like carrageenan, polysorbate 80, and many, many others. Again, double check that label reading resource for a more exhaustive list. These additives are ingredients that you don't necessarily need to eliminate completely from your diet, but you want to minimize your consumption. And then having fiber in your diet helps to protect your gut a little bit so that when you do consume these, they don't have such a negative impact.
That's a really good segue into talking about fiber, which can be a bit of a tricky issue. Some people with GI issues may have trouble with too much fiber. How can they read labels to make sure that they're getting the right amount of it?
So fiber is something that, again, is very individual on tolerance and how much and what types of fiber you are able to tolerate. But I will say that the food labeling regulation for fiber is that a food with 5 grams of fiber or more is considered a high fiber food. So that's what you see on the front of the package, high fiber, if it has 5 grams or more. And then the recommendation is to consume about 25 grams of fiber per day for general overall health. However, this may be too much fiber for someone with GI concerns, and how you consume the fiber can make a big difference as well. Foods that are fortified with fiber, like Fiber One bars, protein bars, cereals, sometimes they add quite a lot of fiber at once, and that can be very disruptive to the GI symptom, creating like gas and bloating, pain, versus more natural containing fiber foods like fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. There are different types of fiber as well. So there's soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber tends to be a little bit more tolerated. And when you think of foods that are softer and more absorbent, those are the foods that have more of the soluble fiber, like oats, sweet potatoes, bananas, foods like that. Keeping your individual portion of fiber to around 3 grams of fiber per less for an individual food item may help you tolerate a little bit better so you're not getting so much fiber all at once. And if you're looking to increase the amount of fiber in your diet for your overall health, do so very, very, very gradually. And I'm talking like 3 grams of fiber every 3 days, because you have to get your digestive system used to more fiber, increasing that like muscle in the digestive tract, and then also manipulating the microbiome so that it tolerates the fiber as well. And drink lots and lots of water. And with increasing your fiber intake, if you blend your fruits and vegetables into smoothies or soups, or cooking them until fork tender, those are generally more tolerated than like the raw fibers.
That's some really useful advice. I know personally, it's very easy to go to your GI and they'll say, eat more fiber. And most of the time, none of us really understand what that means, or there's a fiber supplement and then you have all these symptoms. So that's really useful information. Thank you for sharing that. I think now is a good time to potentially ask if we have any questions from the audience before we transition into talking about portion sizing. Okay, great. So we're just going to move on. We'll save some questions for the end. But let's talk about portions. Sometimes food looks healthy on the label, but serving size can be much smaller than what we might actually end up eating. They talk about everything in moderation. How do we navigate this?
Yeah, Liz, that's a big one. People often overlook the serving size. It's not the first thing that you even really think about, but the nutrition label is based on that portion. So if you are eating more, you will need to adjust those numbers accordingly when you are looking at that label. So for example, if the label lists 10 grams of sugar per serving, but and you're looking at the portion size and it says it's only half a cup, a half a cup is not very big. So if you are eating a whole cup, now you're eating 20 grams of sugar, you've doubled that amount. So you really need to be mindful of those portion sizes. Just on a personal story, it's kind of funny. I've got a 10-year-old son, and he even knows to look at the portion sizes, and he'll oftentimes he'll even get out a measuring cup sometimes, and he'll pour in like pretzels, the amount of pretzels he should be eating, which is cute. But the other sort of tip that I personally use, maybe even not just the bagged or packaged products, but if you are at a restaurant or if you're getting served, oftentimes portion sizes at restaurants or things that you receive are way more. And you can even just with your eyes see, wow, that chicken breast is enormous, or, that's a lot of, baked beans. You could, and oftentimes I do this, I ask for a to-go box and I'll put half of the food right into a to-go box, set it aside so that I'm not even inclined to eat more than what I maybe should be eating. So maybe just a little tip. And that's more just for, like if you're going out to eat or whatnot.
I think that's great. I think that's a very useful, tangible piece of advice that a lot of people can relate to. I know that, especially in the US, you get a big plate of pasta or something when you go
Yeah.
out to eat, and you just keep eating because you think, well, I
Yes.
can't have food. So, to-go boxes, they are good to use, and it's an instant meal that you can heat up later when you get
That's
home.
exactly right. Yeah, you get 2 for 1 because we know the price of things is really expensive too these days. So
Exactly, exactly. Perfect. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground already. Do you think you have any additional tips or tricks that people should know about for our community when it comes to reading food labels for better gut health?
yeah, a few things come to mind. And the first is that really, I hate to say ideal, but maybe the most ideal foods are those that don't even really have a label in the first place. So we're talking, your lean meats, your lean proteins, anything in the produce section, that big, beautiful, bright section, colorful. That should be, in my opinion, where your grocery cart goes first. However, we all need those packaged foods for convenience sake. It's the way of the world, and that's okay. And so we just need to be very mindful of what we're sort of putting in our grocery carts. So oftentimes, and maybe you've heard it in the past, when you're looking at a label, maybe one of the easiest things to do is just, hey, can you pronounce all of those ingredients on the list? And if you can pronounce them, then that's a really good place to start. It starts when you get all those chemically names and the really long scientific things. You need to maybe take a pause and actually pick up another product of the same, coconut milk comes to mind, and it's just a very simple one, but many of them have the guar gums and the emulsifiers to sort of keep that coconut milk so that it doesn't separate. It's the same thing in peanut butter or any of the nut butters. They'll add the extra ingredients so that you don't see that little bit of oil on top or the separation. It's only there for aesthetics so that it looks better, and it does nothing to the taste or enhances the flavor in any way. So if you can take the 2 seconds and stir up the peanut butter, or you get the coconut milk that doesn't have the guar gum and these emulsifiers, and you just shake it up, you get the same results. Same thing with salad dressing. That's another big one too. Salad dressings are full of all of these things that keep it looking all cohesive in the bottle and mixed up, because when you really just take an oil and a vinegar or any sort of acid and some flavorings, you've got a salad dressing. That's essentially all that they are. But when you let it sit on the counter for a little bit of time, it will separate. That oil and vinegar separates and it doesn't look as pretty anymore. And so if you can make them at home, or you can find those in the food aisles that do look a little separated, that's okay, because you shake it up and it looks beautiful just like the other ones do too. So just a couple tips that I go through when I'm literally saving an extra 10 minutes of my day just for grocery shopping, because I know I'm going to want to look at all these labels to see, oh, do they have these gums? Do these have the emulsifiers? They're unnecessary ingredients that your body just doesn't need. And yeah, I mean, I guess aside from that, I would love to see if the audience does have any questions, because I think there's a lot Nicole and I could probably go on and on about about a label.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, while we're waiting for a few questions, I have one that comes to mind. So I think initially, when you start having to read food labels, it can become very intimidating. Do you have any tricks on how to become more comfortable with that practice of going into the store and picking up a food label and, not standing there for half an hour trying to understand what you're reading?
I would say that in today's day and age, we have the internet, and like I can easily go on like walmart.com and like search up different foods. Like if I want salad dressing, and then click into different ones, you get the ingredients right online. So you don't have to worry about doing it in the store with people trying to navigate around you and being in people's way and all of that.
Yeah, that's Nicole, that's a great point. And just even having a grocery list, maybe with those exact brands or those exact products that you want to be looking for, just going in with a plan and it might seem a little time consuming at first, but I've found now that after I've been doing this for some time, I do know exactly what I'm looking for. So maybe taking that bit of time at the beginning, it will set you up for the next however many years, forever, of going in and then knowing exactly, okay, I know that I can pick this product up and I should be safe. The other thing that I will mention is that sometimes the manufacturers actually change their ingredients. So even though I have been buying the same product for 10 years straight, I will still just take a quick little peek at the label and just make sure that they have not added something that wasn't there before.
That's a really good point. I know that me personally, I have celiac disease, so I'm always reading food labels.
Yes.
And manufacturers do change the ingredients occasionally, especially if they change ownership.
Yes.
There was a brand that I really liked that they were completely sugar-free, and now they use cane sugar in
Yep.
their products. So you always have to check the labels, even if you think that it's safe. Always err on the side of caution and just, double check. Once you become
Yes.
used to it, it's like a muscle.
Right. Well, and I would say too that even if you don't come in with I would love to say that I go to the grocery store every time with a list. That's not true. I do not. I end up at the store 5 times a week because I've forgotten something that I really needed for my dish. But it is okay to stand in the aisle, and if you're in the way, I mean, you and everybody else, you're all in each other's way. So it's okay to stand there and look at a label for a moment, and just don't be embarrassed that that's what you're doing, because I think everybody else is probably thinking or doing the same thing anyway.
Yeah, and it does. You do get very used to it. Once you start the practice, it gets a lot easier, a lot quicker, and it just becomes like a natural part of choosing your foods. And yeah, it'll get easier with time.
Well, and sorry, one more thought just popped into my brain too. I know that they've got, and I don't actually have any of these myself, but my friends have showed me the apps, I suppose, where you can scan the product labels and they'll tell you if they're, I guess, clean or approved by whomever created that app. So I guess I can't speak to any specific app. Maybe Nicole, you know better. It might be something to explore. Like I said, I don't have the experience with it, but I know many of my friends find them really useful. And the offensive ingredients will show up in red. Like once you scan the product label, it'll say, this is rated a 25 out of 100, and here's why it has this ingredient and this ingredient that you should avoid. So something else to think about just for ease, maybe to transition into that practice.
Those are some definitely useful tips. I know when I was first diagnosed, those would have been much appreciated because it's very intimidating.
Yes.
So another question that we're thinking about how to incorporate more fiber specifically. Um, do you have any favorite dishes or favorite meal ideas that you could share for people who might be looking to incorporate fiber in a very gradual manner, as to not overload their GI system from the get-go?
Yeah, a couple of my favorite things, like if you're gonna do something like a roasted vegetable or like some kind of like stir fry type thing, start with one new vegetable at a time. Don't do like three or four different mixes, just so you can identify, make sure it's something you can tolerate. Again, you're gradually getting your system used to it. But really, my favorite way to incorporate more fruits and vegetables is smoothies and soups. Like, especially smoothies are really good because you can like steam and puree veggies, put them in like ice cube trays, and just pop them into smoothies. That's a really
Great
sneaky
idea.
way to get vegetables in, and you can see how your system tolerates it. Usually better tolerated cooked and blended. But yeah, smoothies too. I mean, they're smoothies and soups, so comforting and delicious, and just a easy, gentle way to add more fiber.
One thing I'll add too, just because as a caregiver, I'm always thinking on the more how can I hide things for the kids, and now my daughter's older. She doesn't need stuff hidden quite so much. But when she was little, I used to find all sorts of useful ways of just putting in, shredded zucchini or carrots into a pasta sauce or something. If it's something saucy to where you can again cook or shred and make the veggies like kind of small, they're indetectable, and that's another, because they're cooked and mushy, they're easy on your digestive system.
I think those are some very useful practical tips as well. I know that veggies are divisive. Whether or not you grew up eating vegetables too, you might not be able to identify certain vegetables, and also you might not be comfortable cooking with them too. So being able to kind of incorporate them in a way where maybe you can't taste it, maybe you can, um, is definitely helpful. I, for example, have done it before where I've roasted a bunch of vegetables and then I've pureed them down into a pasta sauce. I can't
Mm-hmm.
taste one specific vegetable, but I know they're in there
Yes.
and I'm getting my fiber. So those are some some practical tips. And I also liked the one where you freeze it. I
Yeah.
think that's really great for meal prepping as well.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing those. Okay, I think we're going to bounce back to talking about sugar, if that's all right. Some questions about sugar. I know that sugar can take many different forms. Um, how do we approach certain types of products that might have, high fructose corn syrup and sugar all in one? How do we try and find alternatives that maybe have less sugar or less processed sugars? Do you have any recommendations for that?
So yeah, again, like reading the labels, like if there is a food item that has high fructose corn syrup, sugar, like you probably do want to steer clear of foods like that, and go towards food items that just have sugar in them. If you're eating a food item like that, incorporating again like a dish with fiber and protein, it helps to minimize the impact of sugar on your body overall because it slows the absorption of the bloodstream, reduces the digestive impact of like a high sugar load if you're cutting it kind of with the protein and fiber in like a meal or a snack.
Helpful. I know that sugar is very prevalent in a lot of our processed foods, and we do need processed foods for convenience, but trying to manage that is tricky. So thank you for that feedback. We
Well,
have a
and
few more questions. Yeah, go ahead.
oh,
Please feel
sorry.
free.
No, I was just going to say too, if, and I know we're talking the convenience, but if you do have the opportunity to make some of this stuff at home For example, that would be one really easy way to avoid 90% of the added sugars that you just mentioned, and really just know exactly, hey, there's only sugar in this. And if you do have the chance, this is a trick that it's not a trick. It's just, it's how I have to live the life. It's that freezer, Nicole, like you mentioned, the freezer is your best friend. So if you do have the opportunity, maybe on a weekend, and you want to make some pasta sauce or something, make triple and freeze it. And so then you have pasta sauce that you can set out, for a couple hours or whatnot, or put it in a pot of hot water, and it's perfectly fine and quick, and you know exactly what's in it, and it's healthy and delicious.
Fantastic. Meal prepping is your friend. You heard it here. We have a few more questions coming in. First one is specific to diverticulitis. Do you have any suggestions for eating options while dealing with a diverticulitis flare?
The most important thing is actually while you're in a flare, is to reduce fiber overall. Eat kind of very simple, like simple carbohydrates, lower fiber, like fruits, vegetables, like bananas and potatoes tend to be more tolerated. Opt for like white breads, lean meats, maybe some soups would be good too, but definitely just overall low fiber, low fat to give the colon some time to rest. And then once that flare is over and you're 100% better, incorporating more fiber helps to prevent future flares.
That's super useful advice. I think it reminds me of, I think it's the brat diet is what it's called.
Yep.
So keep that in mind. Another question we have is from Raj. Raj is asking, do you find that patients have less symptoms when they're implementing this specific methodology of food label reading and nutrition?
Yeah, I would say that, reducing, like we talked about the food additives, reducing the food additives and understanding how these different nutrients impact you, whether it's sugar, fiber, fat, moderating kind of all of those nutrients there can help to reduce symptoms overall. It's a lot of really understanding your individual case, keeping food journals and symptom journals, so you can connect the dots as to which food ingredients you may not tolerate. But the more conscientious you are of what you're eating and your symptoms, the less symptoms you'll have, and overall better digestive functioning. Yeah.
Good point. Just having some kind of metacognition about what you're putting into your body, keeping an eye on your symptoms. That will certainly, at the very minimum, if you don't see improvements, you can figure out where to tweak and fine tune things as well. So it's also important to remember that what works for one person doesn't work for the same person. We're all different. We all have different needs.
Yes.
We all have different severity of symptoms. So just keep those things in mind and be very patient with yourself. Okay, we have another question. This one is asking, what tips would you give to patients with limited finance or access to healthy options? Because this often leads to foods with a longer and often unhealthier list of ingredients. That's a very good question.
It's a very good question. And I maybe don't have the perfect answer, but I myself love the stores with the less expensive. I always want to save $1. Let's just put it that way. So I frequent Aldi. I frequent Walmart. I literally go to Walmart probably twice a week. And I've actually, my friends don't believe it because they're like, oh, you probably go to Whole Foods. No, because those I love Whole Foods. I would love to shop there daily, but there are so many wonderful products that you can find at these more discounted stores like Walmart and like Aldi. And you just need to take the time to find those products. And so I have actually taken my friends on shopping field trips, and we have spent an hour, and I have gone through and I've pointed out in all of the package, this is You know, you can, this is safe. Like you can eat this confidently. The products are there. I just hate to say that you have to sort of do a little digging, but that is the short answer to a little bit more of a labor intensive practice. But again, once I had gone through, and I know at Walmart, I can go right to this section, this section, and this section and get all the things that I want. And they are there, they are available. And you just need to take the moment to just sort of look at the labels. And really, I know that sometimes it seems like produce might be a more expensive option, but the cheaper, the money saving route might sometimes be to make these things at home yourself, truly in bulk. And instead of buying the however much it costs the pasta sauce, you just get, you know, your tomatoes or whatever and make your big pot of veggie sauce and freeze it. It takes a little bit more time, but it is in the long run more cost effective, and really better for you too.
And the other thing too with produce is like frozen is a good
Yes,
friend for budget friendly and to last longer. Like frozen vegetables, frozen fruits, they tend to, in a lot of cases, have more nutrients in them than fresh anyway, and they hold for a long time, and they're pretty easy to incorporate.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, frozen is definitely, I grew up eating frozen vegetables just because it was cheaper and it was for the sake of ease. I'm from a very large family. We just bought bulk frozen vegetables. So frozen's definitely the way to go. I'd also recommend for anyone who's interested, checking like weekly flyers for coupons, keeping in mind like things that are seasonally available. That's a big way to lower your overall shopping cart expense. If you're buying strawberries in, you know, October, that's probably one of the most expensive times to buy them, right, depending on where you are. So eating seasonally is a really great help, looking at those weekly flyers, but then also, you know, bargain shopping, looking between different stores. One store might have something for, you know, for $5, like that jar of pasta sauce that might have all the ingredients that you want. It could be $3 at another store. So, you know, if you're able to look at different stores and cost compare, that's another great way to save a few dollars. So.
And if you do notice that you have a great deal, if you are able at that time to buy in bulk, you know, say it's chicken breast and it's a great sale, chicken breast, pop it in the freezer and you'll have chicken breast for a month at that discounted price. You know, if you were able to buy in bulk at that time, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Bulk buying. I am a fan. Okay, we just had another question come in. This one is leading back to ingredients. It's asking, what are your top 3 ingredients to avoid?
I'll start with one. Emulsifiers are a really, really big one to me for avoidance, just for general intestinal health. Like emulsifiers, to give an example of how emulsifiers work, emulsifiers are actually added into medications to increase the absorption into your bloodstream. So think about that with food. If you have an emulsifier like polysorbate, what are the other ones? Maltodextrin. There's a bunch of different like emulsifiers. Again, check the reading labels resource to find out. But if they're in like a food item, then all of those other like artificial colors, or if there's artificial sweeteners, like all of that's going to have more of a chance to go into your bloodstream if you have emulsifiers in your food. So that is a big one for me that I would watch out for.
I'm going to add in the food coloring because it is just completely unnecessary. It doesn't do anything except make the food look a little prettier. And I get that that's what the manufacturer wants, but it does nothing for your body. In fact, as we know, even recently, we've just had that, you know, the red dye, one of them banned finally in the US. It's no good. It's unnecessary. Just avoid it. Find a different product.
Yep. And then another one is partially hydrogenated oils. That is a big one to watch out for. There are studies that directly link consumption of partially hydrogenated oils with heart health issues. So that is like a big one that I would eliminate any foods with that in it for sure.
Do you have any examples of what those kinds of things could look like? I know we talked about emulsifiers like maltodextrin, but any other like common names that might pop up that people could commonly see in their food?
For partially hydrogenated oils, it will say partially hydrogenated X oil. So that's very obvious one. For emulsifiers, carrageenan, polysorbate 80, those are like some common emulsifiers that are found in foods.
Good to know. If you can't read what it says, then it's probably
Exactly.
not the best thing to go in your food. So keep that in mind.
Nicole, I'll pose a question to you real quick. So if the partially hydrogenated oils are the ones we should avoid, are there oils that are going to be a good, thumbs up?
Oils that you would find on the shelves that you could put in your food yourself. So like canola oil, avocado oil, olive oil, like those ones are pretty much green light. Like fairly, healthier than something like a partially hydrogenated oil. I know people worry about seed oils and that kind of stuff, but there's really not enough evidence to suggest that those are super harmful. You don't want to add more stress to your life than needed. So, try and if there's like a pop culture, if there's like something in social media that's telling you not to eat it, try and fact check as much as you can. But yeah, like canola oils, avocado oils, grapeseed oils, like those kinds of things generally should be okay. Again, if you can go to the oil section of your store and buy it, and if it's in a food item, it's probably okay.
That's a great question and a great answer. I know that seed oils are a very trendy topic on social media. A lot of foods tend to market their food as seed oil free.
Yeah.
So don't give yourself anxiety over seed oils. It's not that big a deal. We just had another question come in about hydrogenated oils. Seems to be a hot topic. Can you explain what partially hydrogenated oils actually are? And the follow-up to that is, are they the same as trans fats? Can we get a bit more clarity on what those two things mean?
Yes. So partially hydrogenated oils are trans fat. They're the same thing. What they do is they heat up the oil so it changes the molecular structure and twists like where the hydrogen is sitting. And essentially what that does, it goes into your body and it goes into your bloodstream and it will literally like scrape up like your arteries and like create damages to your arterial wall, which leads to plaque buildup, strokes, and heart attacks.
That's horrible.
It was very scary. When I learned it in college, it was so scary. I was like, I'm not eating those anymore.
Yeah, I'm not either. Well, thank you for whoever asked that question. That was a great question that I think we all did not know that we needed to know about. We're just taking a look to see if there's any other questions. Oh, okay, here's one. Let's jump back to the conversation about gluten. I know the answer, but I'm gonna let you guys talk about gluten a bit more. For people who are gluten sensitive, how do they avoid gluten in like social settings? Do you have any recommendations on how to go about that and what level of strictness people should be eating a gluten-free lifestyle?
So gluten sensitivity and gluten intolerance is a little different than like a gluten allergy or celiacs. Gluten allergies and celiacs 100% avoid gluten at all times. If you're going to a social like get together, social gathering, bringing your own dish is the absolute best way to go to protect yourself. And then if you're going to a restaurant, like speaking with the waiter, speaking with the chef, being very, very clear on what you need to avoid so they can feed you safely. Cross-contamination is always an issue too, so feel free to speak that at a restaurant as well. For gluten sensitivities and intolerances, Usually there is a small amount that you can tolerate, so that if you're in a social setting, I would still say bring your own dish so you can feel comfortable. But maybe talk to other people who've prepared food. You know if you can tolerate even a small amount. Sometimes that little bit is worth it, and just watch the rest of your day. But yeah, that's the best advice I have.
Gluten's tricky. It's very tricky and it's very divisive. So I know that I have a lot of friends who have different types of IBD who have gluten sensitivity, and the tolerance varies like with most trigger foods. So that's a very good piece of advice. Just checking to see if we have any more questions. Okay, right now we don't have any, but I'll turn it back over to you guys to ask if there's anything that, if you had one really big piece of advice, what would you give to folks who are just starting on this journey?
Well, okay, I'll go because this just seems so helpful. If you were just starting on this journey, I mentioned earlier, I've taken some of my friends on grocery store field trips, and we had a great time. And so maybe, and I don't know if this is a possibility for everyone, but if you have a friend, ask, I think that who your friends are who are a little more conscious uh, or not. Maybe ask, hey, will you go to the store with me and just show me? Okay, can we do this together? Because just doing things together is great, and just maybe having that extra support and be able to ask questions to somebody who's actually been doing this a little bit longer. If you have the opportunity, that would maybe be kind of a fun way to start your journey.
Yeah. Additionally, just like, as you're getting used to reading food labels, start with what's in your kitchen, so you don't have to do it for the first time in public in a grocery store. Just like go to your cupboard, start reading the labels, get used to different ingredients. And then I would say start learning to have fun in the kitchen, look up different recipes, learn how to cook things from scratch, start with a couple things, try to open up. I know a lot of people are often scared to like start cooking new things, and they're nervous about it not turning out well, but think of it as like a fun new creative project, and you could learn new things that you never thought you would enjoy.
Yeah, and I mean, I think everybody knows the internet is just chocked full of recipes. If on nutritional therapy for IBD, we actually have over 1,000 recipes. Some of them are as simple as just literally a peanut butter banana smoothie. Not all of the recipes that you need to try involve 30 ingredients and 3 hours of your time. So, just like Nicole said, start small and just start with, maybe you usually go to Planet Smoothie, instead just make a smoothie at home. Just try it and just see, because you probably surprise yourself at how adept you can become. And it's okay to follow a recipe for something very, very simple, even like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think having your people around you is really important. Having that kind of emotional and social support goes a long way, especially when, so much of what we do as people centers around food. So that's really, really useful, as well as, that practical advice. Start in your kitchen, go in your cupboard, grab something off the shelf and take a look. What can you read? And if you don't understand something, look it up. Just take that little bit of time to be curious about food. It really helps start rewiring your brain to be able to read those food labels.
And once you start reading them, it's a slippery slope, because you won't be able to stop, and you might end up with a situation like my husband, who's like, I just can't believe that you've got me started on this. Now, I'm looking at everything.
Knowledge is power.
Yes.
We just had another question come in talking about GMO and non-GMO labeling. What do we know about these two terms and how do we identify these kinds of things?
So GMO is genetically modified food ingredients. And there are a lot of things these days that can be genetically modified. There is, I guess, some evidence that genetically modifying foods could change how it impacts our system. Now, the research is a little mixed on this. And this is one of those things I would say that if you're just starting out, probably not to worry about too much. But yeah, it is something that you can start to pay attention to. I am actually not sure of the labeling requirements for GMO off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I was looking at our resource here, and I don't think we have it specifically stated either on the resource. They do, I believe that some products do label them. I think it's more for advertising. It's not a requirement, though.
Yeah, I think that GMO, non-GMO is a bit of a tricky misnomer at times. GMOs aren't always labeled, and non-GMO doesn't seem to be a super regulated term. Same with organic. So, if you want to eat organic foods, I think one of the easiest things to do is eat whole foods, eat fruits and veggies, and things that don't have food labels on them at all. Because you can get organic produce from, a farmer's market or from the grocery store. It'll be labeled organic. So those are things to keep in mind if that is something that you are inclined towards. But jury's still out.
And Liz, I guess I'll mention too, I sort of piggybacking on going back to the how to stay cost effective question in produce, like organic specifically. There has been a lot of research over the clean 15 and the dirty dozen list of produce, and you can just Google those terms and find the 12 of the highest offenders that you probably want to search for organically, and then the 15 that are pretty safe. They've proven to be pretty safe to eat as far as you don't necessarily need to buy organic for those products.
Those are some very practical tools. And because there's information to back it up too, you don't have to, worry about going down a social media spiral to find the information. So that's really useful information.
Well, and for me, practically too, I know my daughter loves apples. She eats like an apple a day. And so that is something that, well, it is on the dirty dozen list. So we do buy organic anyway, but that would be something that just in our house personally, I would buy organic because I know she's consuming so much of them that I would just want to be sure, if there was any negatives to not buying organic, then we can avoid those. So I don't know that that's a research scientifically backed tip, but it's at least in my opinion, if you're going to eat something in abundance and if you can afford it and if it's available, maybe seek out the organic as much as you can.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd go one step further to say that if we're talking about access and, you might have, if you only have one grocery store and you don't really have access to those kinds of foods, I would look into potentially like community gardens and see what's available there, as well as getting involved in community gardens. I love gardening. I think gardening is great.
Me too. Do it. I'm all excited in Florida, which is where I am. It's almost blueberry season, and I will go weekly and pick blueberries from the local blueberry farm, and it's fun. It's kind of therapeutic. They're delicious.
That's crazy to me. I'm from New England and blueberry season is like July or August. So I'm like, it's March.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you have gardens around, if you have farms around, if you're able to participate in even bartering or a CSA, those are some really great options to also get some of those whole foods that you might be looking for. So keep those things in mind. And the closer you are to your food, the more you know what goes into the food as well.
Right.
So that's a little tip. Um, we're just checking to see if there's any more questions. Okay, so another question. Um, Nutritional Therapy for IBD obviously has this amazing resource that we've been talking about a bit more. What kind of things can folks expect to see in the resource? And then just like more on the website.
Well, I've actually got it pulled up right here so I can tell you exactly. We have a lot of what we've already talked about, actually. We've got a section on the serving size, which we discussed, um, the different nutrients and the like the daily value, the percentage. You'll be able to find information on that, which we did not touch on today. So that might be helpful. There's more about the natural versus added sugar, and then you'll find a really exhaustive list, which, if, at a minimum, read this list of everything that is actually like sugar that's not labeled as the word sugar. You might be surprised as to some of these ingredients that actually are used to sweeten products. It's fascinating, actually. We talked about the order of the ingredients. There is, like Nicole mentioned, the full list of all of those additives and preservatives and those emulsifiers. So definitely check that section out. We have descriptions of what those little labelings, the little logos on the outside of packaged products. So you'll kind of know what those actually mean. So if you see, certified gluten-free, clearly, I think we all know what certified gluten-free is, but maybe, the USDA organic, what does that actually mean? So there's several of those listed on there. We talk about like grass-fed or pasture-raised. That's another, I think, very hot topic to talk about, having your grass-fed meats and poultry and such. So check out those sections. And then on the website itself, we have just extensive, all scientific resources. And you can search in our articles section, you can search by topic. I mean, there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of articles in there that are evidence-based, and you can read about numerous topics, really. And it's kind of fun to explore that little section too. So the website is very comprehensive. I would definitely recommend checking it out. And the search function is super useful. The last thing I'll mention about the website also is that if you do go to the recipes section, it is all, you can use the filter. The filter is really, really useful. You can filter by diet type if you are following a particular diet, including like the gluten-free. If you have celiac, you can use that filter and it'll give you all of the recipes that will apply to your particular diet. But there's tons of filters, not just that one. So you can even search by holiday. If you want to cook something for Hanukkah or for Easter, you'll find that on there too. It's really neat.
That sounds fantastic. I know that during the holidays, especially, people are always looking for recipes.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like if you are in the midst of preparing for, I guess Easter's the next big one, Easter and Passover. And if you celebrate Mardi Gras, there's
St. Patrick's Day.
And St. Patrick's Day. That's true. That's a very good point. I always forget about St. Patrick's Day. until the day hits, and then I'm like, oh yeah. Um, so, keep those things in mind. Hopefully, there are some good recipes that you can share. It's a good idea to think about like, how do I adapt recipes if you are trying to, um, if you might have family recipes? Do you guys have any tips for, how you might take something that you've always had and try and adapt it to a new?
I literally just Google like alternatives, like substitutions. Like for
Mhm.
example, if you have a recipe with like regular flour and you want to use like a couple of gluten-free flours, I would Google like replacing wheat flour with like tapioca and like almond flour. Like how would I, do the measurement comparisons? Or if you want to reduce the fat in it, like butter, ways to substitute butter to reduce fat. You can get really, really good recommendations just on the internet of how to
Mhm.
substitute different ingredients in cooking and baking.
That's super useful. Yeah, I think fats can be very tricky, especially like baking is very much a science. So just being willing to experiment in the kitchen and not be afraid of failure. It's
Yes.
okay to it's trial and error. It's experimental. So those are some very good practical tips as well. Our questions, but just give it another minute or so to see if any more questions filter in. I know that I've learned a lot so far on this stream, so thank you guys for sitting and chatting with us for the last hour. Okay, I think we're done with Q&A for now, but if you have any questions, um, this stream, you guys can definitely go to the Nutritional Therapy for IBD website. Obviously, the QR code at the beginning is how to access the resource. If you did not take a screenshot of that, you can definitely go back after this live is over and double check. I believe the replay will be available. Um, if not, you can just send an email and somebody will get that information to you. Um, but I do want to say thank you so much to our friends from Nutritional Therapy for IBD and the staff for making this event possible, as well as for sharing these valuable insights with us. And to our community, we hope that today's conversation helps you feel more confident when reading food labels and making better choices for your digestive health. Thank you so much for tuning in. For more information, make sure to follow and check out Nutritional Therapy for IBD on their website, as well as checking out um, that information packet that we talked about throughout today's conversation. They have obviously lots of recipes and useful tips. And don't forget to, uh, again, check out this replay once it's uploaded. Thank you guys so much for your time today. Again, my name is Liz. I am a Koji ambassador, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your Saturday.